Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely fantastic documentary video that takes us completely behind the scenes of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. We're going to jump right into this curatorial tour and unpack the staggering scale along with the deeply hidden stories behind some of history's absolute greatest masterpieces. So, 7 million. That is the number of people from literally all over the world who walk the halls of the Met every single year. It is a massive influx of visitors. But as our source documentary points out, while millions of people look at the art, a lot of them actually walk right past the incredible nuances and historical secrets that we are going to explore together today. And to really wrap your head around the physical footprint of this museum, you have to consider its staggering size. We're talking 2.2 million square feet. This monumental space houses 17 different curatorial departments. Honestly, navigating it can feel like traversing a small, densely packed city, and it is so easy to get totally overwhelmed by the sheer volume of history layered into every single corridor. Within that massive footprint, there are over 2 million works of art in the permanent collection, spanning 5,000 years of world culture. Like the documentary video highlights, this one single building contains more masterpieces than most of us are going to see in an entire lifetime. And that really sets the stakes for our explainer today. We need a way to cut through all that noise, structure our visit, and truly appreciate what we're looking at. Okay, so to guide our journey, we've distilled this vast collection down into our agenda for today. We'll be looking at the Temple of Dendur, the death of Socrates, Madame X, Washington crossing the Delaware, and finally, the Buddha of medicine. Let's kick things off with Section 1, Rebuilding the Temple of Dendur, from the Nile to New York. Commissioned by Emperor Augustus way back in 23 BC, this stunning Egyptian temple had a modern journey that is honestly a marvel all on its own. Back in 1965, a dam project threatened to completely flood the area where the temple originally stood, right above the Nile. So an international campaign was swiftly launched to save the region's Nubian monuments. And to transport this massive stone structure, it was meticulously disassembled brick by brick, carefully numbered, shipped, and then completely rebuilt indoors at the Met. It's just this incredible physical journey of rescue and historical preservation. Now, what's really fascinating here is the hidden natural world incorporated directly into the architecture. Contrary to popular belief, these ancient temples weren't just made to house mythological figures. The museum intentionally features water running alongside the temple to accurately portray the Nile River. And on the inner lining, if you look really closely, you can actually spot carvings of papyrus and lotus plants springing right from the water. Plus, those giant columns, they're designed to rise up to the sky just like stalks of papyrus bound with lotus blossoms. It's this beautiful contrast of religious depictions with very grounded earthly elements. Moving on to Section 2, The Death of Socrates and Jacques-Louis David's Artistic License. So Jacques-Louis David's 18th century neoclassical masterpiece depicts the execution of the Greek philosopher Socrates by poison hemlock, exactly as it was told by his famous student Plato. But this painting brilliantly illustrates what we might call the illusion of perfection in art. Because the actual historical fact is that Socrates was 70 years old when he was sentenced to death, and Plato was just a young man. But David, he painted Socrates as this much younger, idealized, muscular figure sitting upright. Meanwhile, he depicted Plato, who was sitting quietly at the foot of the bed there, as an elderly man looking away in contemplation. David deliberately manipulated those historical facts to give the whole scene way more poignant emotional weight. But the absolutely crucial point here is that hovering hand. The documentary notes that if you look at David's preliminary sketches for this painting, you can kind of see inside his creative mind. He originally considered a few different placements for the arms, but for the final canvas, he made the masterful choice to leave Socrates' hand just hovering right over the cup of hemlock, rather than actually touching it. This tiny addition of empty space freezes the ultimate moment of choice. It's a deeply intense, suspended moment between his present life and his ultimate fate. It is pure storytelling completely without distraction. All right, Section 3, Madame X and Sargent's Scandalous Ambition. John Singer Sargent's simple yet totally striking portrait of the Parisian socialite Virginie Amélie of Vergniaud wasn't your standard paid commission. In a letter to a friend, Sargent actually revealed his true motives, writing, "I have a great desire to paint her portrait and have reason to think she would allow it, and is waiting for someone to propose this homage to her beauty." So he actively sought her out, essentially using her allure in a highly deliberate, ambitious move to boost his own artistic reputation in the elite circles of Parisian high society. Well, that ambition backfired spectacularly, resulting in the 1884 Paris Salon scandal. The original version of this painting featured one of her gold dress straps hanging loosely off her shoulder. And at the time, this unconventional, kind of retreating pose, combined with that fallen strap, was considered deeply sexually suggestive. It drew intense ridicule rather than the praise Sargent was hoping for. In fact, it scandalized the piece so much that Sargent actually went back and repainted the strap to sit securely on her shoulder, which is how we see it today. He actually kept the painting for 30 years before finally selling it to the Met in 1916, calling it the best thing he had ever done. Next up, Section 4, Washington's Monumental Crossing and Emanuel Leutz's Patriotic Vision. Emanuel Leutz's massive 12 by 21-foot canvas is literally the largest framed painting in the entire Met, and it is a perfect study in expectation versus historical reality. It depicts a life-size George Washington leading a surprise attack across the half-frozen Delaware River. But the historical reality? That famous crossing took place in the middle of a terrible, freezing storm at night, and the iconic Stars and Stripes flag they were holding didn't even exist until 9 months after the event. But look at the painting. The morning sun is rising, beautifully illuminating the scene, and that flag is proudly displayed. Leutze, who, surprisingly enough, painted this in Germany in 1850, purposefully prioritized patriotic spirit and hope over strict historical accuracy, all to elevate the morale and legacy of Washington's underfunded army. And this brilliantly illustrates something even more profound about the piece. Let's look closely at the incredible diversity of the crew depicted in that boat. There are 11 men surrounding Washington, and among them you'll find a man in a Scottish bonnet, a soldier of African descent, a man in traditional indigenous clothing, and 2 farmers. Leutze was making a clear, incredibly powerful point here. America's foundation as an immigrant country built by people of all backgrounds was true in the 1700s and remains its enduring strength today. That is the true, lasting takeaway of this monumental canvas. Finally, we arrive at Section 5. The Buddha of Medicine, a 700-year-old Yuan dynasty mural. Now, to fully appreciate this enormous mural, which is actually the museum's largest unframed piece, without feeling completely overwhelmed, we first have to understand samsara. This is the endless cycle of rebirth in Buddhism. Highly enlightened beings, known as bodhisattvas, take a vow to help all sentient creatures find release and escape from this exact cycle. Defining this crucial term really helps us understand the true mission of this central red-robed figure, Baishe Jaguru, the Buddha of medicine, and the enlightened beings flanking him. Because when you break down the 18 surrounding subjects, this densely populated composition is suddenly no longer intimidating. You have 6 bodhisattvas seeking to help others find release from samsara. Up top, you'll notice 2 small circles, one red and one white, symbolizing the sun and the moon, conveying that the Buddha of medicine works tirelessly, day and night. And then, further out, 12 warriors stand by to reinforce the Buddha's vow. Suddenly, this massive, busy mural transforms right before our eyes into a highly structured, delicate narrative of healing and dedication. Which brings us to our conclusion for today's explainer. The documentary video makes a really fantastic final point. The purpose of art is to provoke thought rather than to intimidate. So I want to leave you with this question. How will you let art provoke you on your next museum visit? Just remember that behind every single masterpiece, there's a deeply human story, a hidden historical context, or a deliberate artistic choice just waiting to be uncovered. Next time you're standing in front of a canvas or a towering temple wall, look a little closer, make your own connections, let in the history. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep exploring.